All right, kids, time to learn something on the Pandorapedia. Like I said, I will not show everything, but the more important, what I at least consider the more important stuff. Starting with the Unobtanium, remember the whole McGuffin, why the RDA is here. Well, for matter-antimatter energy generators, superluminal communication operational magnet trains, high temperature superconductor is capable of both repelling magnetic fields and trapping them within itself. Metallic silver gray cubic crystal, natural current is found in Pandora, refined product current market value at 20 billion per kilo, so it's extremely valuable. Superconductivity is the property of certain materials to conduct electricity with absolutely no resistance, and thus no loss of electrical energy dissipated as heat in the wire. It is a manifestation of quantum physics rather than just normal reduction of electrical resistance with temperature. Superconducting materials also have unique magnetic properties. Modern civilization independent of superconducting technology for the major areas of power generation, transportation, interstellar travel. In addition, many specialized applications such as superluminal communication and computer hyperchip manufacturing would be impossible without it. When the world's first high-temperature superconductor was created in the late 21st century, it proved to be useless because of inherent instabilities. Further efforts proved futile, and researchers finally termed their goal Unobtanium. The spelling was later changed to Unobtanium to conform with chemical element naming, although Unobtanium is a compound, not an element. Their matters stood the first starship reached Alpha Centauri A and discovered a deposit of high-temperature superconducting mineral, Unobtanium, had been obtained at last. Pandora Unobtanium beat the best superconductor that humans ever created. It remains superconducting up to its melting point of 1516 degrees Celsius. Unobtanium was also incredibly resistant to magnetic fields, remaining superconducting when surrounded by a field of 1 billion Gauss, 100,000 Teslas, more than 1,000 times better than any Terra material. Superconductors repel external magnetic fields. The continent-spanning maglev trains that were built in the last half of the 21st century utilized this principle, but the necessity of constantly refrigerating low-temperature superconducting magnets to liquid nitrogen temperatures limited their profitability. It was only after large quantities of refined unobtainium were brought back for Pandora that it became economically feasible to expand the system worldwide. Essentially, again, this thing is immensely cost-freeing for mankind, so obviously they want as much as they can. That's the reason why they want to augment as much, but that's literally just one of his property. Again, unobtainium is more like a McGuffin than anything. Gerald Hurwitz and Kadan Goma built the first prototype matter-antimatter power generator in the 20th century. Despite their remarkable breakthrough, the scientists doubted that their generator would ever be practical for powering anything less than a major city because it required a massive refrigeration system to maintain the low-temperature superconducting magnets that contained the matter-antimatter reaction. Indeed, a full two-thirds of the first interstellar vehicle, the ISB Ray Bradbury, was devoted to its power generating and cooling system, but Pandora's Unobtainium changed all of that, making today's commercial interstellar cargo vessels a reality.
So basically, Pandora's Unobtainium is way better than ours.
I still need to read. Alright, yes. When the first sample of unobtainium was extracted from its ore, it was found to contain an extremely strong magnetic field, in complete violation of everything that was known about superconductors. Scientists were completely baffled until macroscanning revealed first of unobtainium's main secrets. Unlike the fragile crystals with human-created superconducting compounds, the mineral found on Pandora was a stable quasi-crystal with its atoms arranged in a never-repeating but still orderly pattern with five-fold symmetry. The structure is not only mechanically rugged, but also has microscopic voids in a quasi-crystalline structure that contain magnetic flux lines, surrounding them with superconducting matrix, but still keeping the magnetic field out of the superconducting material itself. There's a magnetic flux that passes through these holes are retained by them, which anchors the magnetic field within unobtainium. The magnetic field, although bound to the unobtainium, extends outside of it, looping from the North Pole to the South. Essentially, it is a magnet, but it doesn't work as one peak, proper that magnet would, which will be told also more later. Researchers believe
how do they work?
But billions of years ago, when the planets and satellites of the Centaurus system were condensing from primordial stellar nebula, a Mars-sized planet planetesimal crashed into the still molten Pandora. The moon's nickel iron core was disrupted. The high temperature and pressure produced in collision far exceeded anything brought by human technology. These forces interacted with Polyphemus' intense magnetic field and created conditions suitable for the production of this unique substance. The first human explorers found fossilized evidence of Unobtanium prodigious magnetic fields in the form of huge stone arches that spanned thousands of feet. Researchers determined that the arches were created by molten rock containing iron ore was trapped in the loops of superconducting magnetic fields by Unobtanium deposits and held there until cooled and solidified. The famous floating mountains of Pandora are also a manifestation of the Unobtanium deposit. Unobtanium can indefinitely retain a magnetic field that was present when it was formed. The opposite end of a magnetic field have two different polarities. Portion of fields with like polarities repel each other, and unlike ones attract. A floating mountain is formed when a large mass of rock containing unobtanium with a trapped magnetic field is broken loose by meteoric impacts, seismic event, or other natural catastrophe, and then turned over or moved into a region enveloped by a magnetic field with the opposite polarity. There you go, Pedro. The reason why we're floating off the Pandora
magnetism.
Basically.
Okay.
I will take this over just magic.
How sad is it that there's more world building in this dialogue for the movie than in the actual movie?
There are other specific conditions that must occur as well. The superconducting mineral deposit must be in the upper portion of a floating mountain with a large amount of non-magnetic rock underneath to act as a ballast. Okay, much like the keel of a boat. Ballast, sorry.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the mountain will simply flip over and come crashing down, pulled by the magnetic field in the ground. The configuration of the Unobtanium deposit in the ground is also important. It must be somewhat weaker directly underneath and stronger to the sides to keep the mountain from moving sideways. Because of intense magnetic fields associated with Unobtanium deposit, mining operations are severely restricted as to the composition of mining tools and machinery. Tools cannot contain any ferromagnetic elements, cobalt, iron, nickel, and some rare earths like gadolinium, because they will become so strongly magnetized that their moving parts will become immobile. The tools themselves will be drawn to the Unobtanium deposit, where they will be permanently embedded. Non-ferromagnetic elements such as chromium and manganese become magnetic when combined with other elements, further limiting the use of steel alloys and other common materials. As a result, exotic and costly compounds, beryllium, copper, tungsten, carbide, etc., must be employed. Troubles do not end here. Whenever a conducting substance is moved in a magnetic field, an electric current is generated. This current can raise the temperature to damaging levels, interfere with the operation of electrical circuits, and interact with the magnetic field to produce mechanical forces. For example, a miner swinging a pick with a beryllium copper, not magnetic but electrically conducting metal alloy, head would feel as though it was moving the pick through molasses. The faster the pick moved, the more resistance it would encounter. Even if the pick would be swung quickly, induced eddy currents would hit it until it was too hot to hold. All of this is academic, of course. Humans cannot go anywhere near all Unobtanium deposits. The magnetic fields nearby are so intense that even the slightest movement of a human body induces electrical currents that completely disrupt the functioning of the brains, nerves, and muscles. And 1,000 feet away from the edge of an Unobtanium deposit, people feel strange tactile sensations and distortion in the visions and hearing if they run or try to throw things. They may also have disturbing thoughts of compulsions. They may also experience irregular heartbeats, limb paralysis, muscle tremor, or vertigo and nausea. As a result, the mining operations are conducted by remote control using optical signals carried by armor fiber optic cables. Mining machinery uses ceramic cutters and fiber-reinforced plastic structural components. Where metal parts must be used, they are made of lamination separated by insulating layers to reduce the deleterious effects and manageable levels. Power comes from turbines driven by hot gases produced from chemical reactions similar to a solid fuel rocket motor. When Unobtanium ore is pulled from excavation, the process is tempered by the attraction between its entrained magnetic field and the remaining ore body. The excavated ore must be heated to its melting point, 15-16 degrees Celsius, which then releases the trapped magnetic field. The energy stored in this field is captured as the field collapses and fed back to the electric furnace that heats the removed core, or reducing the amount of internal power required. Basically, so that's another thing that the movie doesn't really explain. The fact that they need a lot of things that are not properly metal related in order to properly work on Pandora. Anyway, the Avatar.
Everybody got that?
Well,
Good.
the Avatar program was developed to allow humans close interaction with the indigenous humanoids, the Navi. A clone Navi humanoid is initially created in vitro on Earth and then allowed to grow to maturity in an amnio tank during the 5-year trip to Pandora. Genetic material from the future human operator is incorporated into the Avatar embryo, allows the development of the anatomic structures needed to allow a mental link to be established with a particular individual. Creepy.
Yeah.
The Avatar program was originally intended to create mind workers who did not need environmental protection system and could eat Pandoran foodstuffs. But the cost of a mental link system remained too high for the numbers needed. Avatars are now used only to interact with the Navi, to study them and to study the Pandoran ecosystem. It was hoped that the avatars could act as unofficial ambassadors, but Navi have, for the most part, viewed these hybrid creatures with a mix of contempt and mistrust. I wonder why. The cloned avatar has the body structure of the physiology of a Pandoran native. However, adding the human genes necessary to create the mental link ability to the avatar's genetic makeup altered the anatomy to the extent of producing 5 digits, different from the normal 4 of an Navi on the hands and feet, and reducing the size of the eyeballs. The reason for this is not yet known. This is the shrug. The current Avatar program in Hell's Gate is headed by senior science officer Monroe.
So if even the state of doesn't know, what hopes do we have?
I guess James at this point was like, well, I wanted to have characters looking different, so I don't know. The Avatar program was initiated to improve communication with the Navi, the intelligent humanoids on Pandora. Human volunteers are paired with avatars, which are artificially created human-Navi hybrids controlled by persona projection technology. While the human's controller remains in a sleep-like state in a psionic link unit, his or her personality inhabits and completely controls a custom-made Navi body. The link is total. The human believes he is actually inhabiting the Navi body with all senses, reflexes, and body function fully operational. The avatar body, having been grown in an amnio tank with the help of growth accelerants, had no personality of its own and it's inert. Yeah, let's just move on. Each avatar is specially made using genetic information from its human controller, and despite obvious difference in size and physiology, is equivalent to its controller twin. This genetic matching is necessary to allow morphic projection to operate on the alien body. Attempts to use unmatched bodies are inevitably failed. Originally part of RDA's Navi outreach program investigated at the behest of Earth government authorities, the Avatar program has moved from being a poorly defined xenological experiment controlled by Earth-based bureaucrats, ivory tower academics, and populist politicians to become a tightly managed engineer project incorporating the most advanced technology from RDA's labs. The existence of many was the most surprising discovery exploration of Pandora. Under strong pressure from the UN, scientists and the general public, the RDA agreed to set up a program to enhance communication between humans and Navi. At first, this consisted solely of indigenous terrain program to study Navi culture and language and to attempt to establish communication between man and Navi. But practical difficulties soon showed a need for a more profound means of communication between the human and Navi species. RDA research has already established the possibility to direct mental communication between humans, and RDA scientist Dr. Cordell Lawcraft was given the task of carrying his Dark Dreamer project, which sought to transmit mental process thoughts to humans as a distance to interspecies communication. Initial dissection of Navi specimens found that although Navi show a surprising degree of external convergent evolution, internally they are quite different from humans. The Navi brain in particular, with its external tendrils and free low structure, was a daunting obstacle. Building on work with brain-wide primates and condemned criminals, right, Dr. Lawcraft was able to establish that fully sensory bonding could be established between human twins, human animal hybrids and share common DNA, and human Navi hybrids with common genetic blueprints. Since Navi don't use DNA or RNA to carry their genetic information, producing a translation table that matches DNA with MV transcriptase closely enough to allow lemomorphic resonance strong enough to communicate to occur require months of computer time and multiple failed experiments, some of which caused irreparable trauma to volunteer subjects. But eventually the Avatar program succeeded in producing the first viable hybrids between completely unrelated species, a considerable achievement since, as Dr. Locker remarked, humans are far more closely related genetically to garden slugs than to Navi.
Well, that makes sense, to be fair.
With the help of psionic amplification and thanks to customized raised reception nodes grow into avatar brains from the earliest blastomere stage of development, humans controllers can now operate their avatars distance of tens of kilometers. Owing to poor measurable outcomes in the field, indigenous terrain program and the avatar program were eventually merged, with only limited informal research still conducted into naviculture by human avatar operators. Currently, avatars are mainly used for reconnaissance, liaison, and exploration, but if native Navi are recruiting to mining workforce, it is anticipated that more avatars will be needed for supervising and policing. Dr. Lovecraft has been nominated for multiple Nobel Prizes in biological science, but the nominations have invariably been withdrawn following protests from human rights organizations, the UN Faith Council, and the animal rights activists.
So,
Again, I wonder why.
All this hard work just so we can justify that scene where Jake has sex with Zoe Saldana.
To an extent, basically. If you have other questions, also, Jova, please note them. You can ask me at the end. Same goes for all of you. There you go. When dislodge these floating rocks, will hover over Pandora with magnetic fields associated with Unobtanium.
Did you insert this music?
Yes, it's from Final Fantasy 14. Let's talk about the RDA, Resource Development Administration, or the Corp. The largest single non-government organization in the known universe, a massive corporation involves the interests ranging from mining, transportation, medicines, weapon, communication, and a soldier program. More powerful than most Earth governments. It's literally the Shinra. The RDA's monopoly rights to all products shipped to delivered from Pandora and any other off-Earth location. These rights were granted to RDA in perpetuity with the Interplanetary Committee Administration, ICA, with the stipulation that they abide by a treaty that prohibits weapon of mass destruction and limits. With 263 billion shareholders, RDA is the oldest and largest of the quasi-governmental administrative entities, QGAEs. But its origins are far more modest. The entity that would become RDA was little more than a Silicon Valley garage setup in the early 21st century when its two founders borrowed money from family members to begin the company. Of course. Within a few decades, the company had the stature to propose a construction of a war-spanning rapid transit system that will allow entire population groups to conveniently commute hundreds or even thousands of miles to perform work where it was needed without impinging on the cultural values of most populations. This led to the current global network of maglev trains that require the superconductor Unobtanium for the conductor continued operation. The company's early expedition to Pandora were seen as colossal risk. The construction of the ISB Venture Star alone was an enormous strain on capital resources, but with the exclusive mining rights to Unobtanium, which at the time publication is valued at 20 million per kilo, and potential profits for counter-virals, biofuels, and cosmetics, the enormous capital investment has paid off.
Nice.
To an extent, yes. There you go. These high-tech structures contain non-necessary technology to operate psionic link UEs in the field, often hundreds of kilometers away from the avatar compound. Solar panels ensure that the shack can remain operational for an indefinite amount of time. Alright, next up, if I recall correctly, I'm gonna check the human characters, I think. Alright, you go. Although every member of the Avatar program has basic combat training, they are not soldiers. They are equipped with simple AVTR clothing, and the M30 gun designed specifically for their 3-meter tall frame. What the Avatars lack in gear, they make up for this with Navi equivalent strength in TG. See the Avatar program entry for more.
Alright,
The Tipani Home Tree. Over 20,000 years old, Home Tree is the spiritual and physical home of the Tipani clan of the Navi. It is where they sleep and eat, learn and labor. The tree itself is over 150 meters tall, and its diameter is many times of a large giant sequoia. Its interior is distinguished by a massive helix-like spiral core and boasts multiple levels upon which the Navi community craft and exact rituals and customs.
Is this the tree that got cut down in the movie?
No, it's the one that we used here. There are different type of trees. A group of stone monoliths. I forgot if I read this. No, actually. Maybe I read it later or now. I forgot. Sorry. The Hallelujah Floating Mountains. A group of stone monoliths were over thousands of meters below the surface of Pandora. Site of Inkimaya, Stairway to Heaven. Profound site of passage. Rite of passage for Navi youth. Study of his mountains led, blah, blah, blah. Neither of the aforementioned mechanisms could explain how tremendous masses of rock could remain airborne. Scientists assumed that it must have something to do with intense magnetic fields of the area, but they had no explanation for their source. It was not until the microstructure of Unobtanium was elucidated and the billions of voids in the quasi-crystal matrix were found to contain trapped magnetic flux lines. This accounted for the strength of the magnetic fields, but it still did not explain the manner in which the floating mountains maintained their stability over the eons within the changes within weight distribution brought about by plant growth and material erosion caused by weathering. With you. The answer was found as a result of site surveys conducted by RDA geologists. When accurate maps of ground magnetic isobars were studied, they revealed a magnetic field gradient that surrounded each floating mountain with a perimeter of increased field strength that acted as a magnetic fence. This explained their stable position, but raised a new question of how this situation came about. Two schools of thought arose. The first, and by far the largest, originally propounded by Dimitri Pekta of Lunas Armstrong University. It was with some of a sort of positive feedback mechanism during Pandora's molten phase attracted large areas of magnetic fields in an unobtainium deposit, and their mutual repulsion finally pushed a large chunk of unobtainium containing matter away to hang in the air until it cooled and solidified. The ordinary non-magnetic rock was denser and settled to the bottom of the molten mass as it cooled, forming the necessary ballast, like the heavy keel of a boat, as mentioned. The crater left behind was therefore deficient in a superconductor as it was associated magnetic field, resulting in a ring of stronger field in the ground forming around the crater that restrained the floating mountain. In time, surface flows of rain, runoff water carried in dirt to fill the holes. The second and minority opinion held that this was an ad hoc theory created after the fact and merely deferred the prime cause to unspecified positive feedback mechanism. This group believed that the finely balanced floating mountains required some sort of conscious supervision during the creation. They directed their attention to the worldwide links between the various landforms and the satellite ecology as represented by the phenomenon that Dami refers as AWA. New studies have raised more questions than they have answered. The individual mountains have been observed to float considerable distance from the initial position and to bump and rub against one another. Both of these behaviors are at variance with the field gradient theory. Many of the mountains have dangling vines that have anchored themselves to the ground below, and changing amounts of waters in lakes, rivers, and waterfalls. All these factors alter the weight imbalance of the formation, yet they appear to maintain a relatively constant altitude. Other floating mountains are completely unencumbered, but remain visibly bound to a fixed location. The only other factor to date that upsets the stability of advent mining operation in the shadow of one of the mountains. A score of personnel were killed during an excavation when a ship-sized formation suddenly inverted and crashed down on the workers. While most of the people accepted that the removal of things disrupted the magnetic fields around the mountain, a few believe that it was an act of quote-unquote balancing initiated by AWA.
Consider this your homework before, so you can understand Avatar 2.
Floating mountains and stone arches are Pandora's two signature landforms. Both are markers of the presence of unobtainium. They also serve to warn pilots of a nexus of intense magnetic fields that can confound their navigation system and alter operation of the aircraft. The mountains are considered sacred by the Navy. They are the staging grounds for Inkimaya, Stairway to Heaven, again, a treacherous spot fundamental artifact which a young Navi must select or be selected by capturing and successfully bond with one of the Ikran, the Banshee, who nested there, as we saw in the movie. The first human explorers to see images of floating mountains were awestruck, as are all humans lucky enough to have seen the phenomenon. The sight of billions of tons of rock floating as weightlessly as a cloud was inexplicable, almost hallucinatory. The reality of the phenomenon became apparent after a science team measured the prodigious magnetic fields of its supported the mountains. Early researchers were still at a loss. 3 months later, the initial unobtainium deposit was found. Its superconducting properties provided the first clue to help unravel the mystery on the floating mountains. It has been known since ancient time like magnetism follows north to south or south to south, north to south to repel each other. Naturally occurring lodestones were used to early experimenters who mapped the patterns of magnetic fields by sprinkling powder onto that. Early attempts of magnetic levitation failed, largely because the configuration was inherently unstable. As the upper magnet was lowered into position, it would flip over, its opposite pole would then be attracted to the lower magnet, and it would crash down. It took years to realize that in order to achieve levitation, the lower magnetic fields must be stronger at the edges and weaker at the center. The upper magnet also needed a non-magnetic ballast to keep it from inverting, but even when such an apparatus was constructed, it was found that it was still unstable. If the upper magnet moved ever slightly off-center, it would immediately be attracted in the nearest edge magnet, causing instability. Also, the relatively weak fields produced by natural magnets limited the weight that could be levitated. So yeah, again, it's still relatively science fiction. It was only after modern electronics became available and electromagnets with active feedback circuits incorporated into mechanism that stable magnetic levitation was achieved. Unfortunately, the electrical resistance or copper wires cause of the electromagnets dissipate large amounts of the power as heat. Thus, the process was too inefficient to have many commercial applications. With the occasional terrestrial superconductor that operated at liquid nitrogen temperatures, minus 321 Fahrenheit, it became possible to levitate heavy objects. The first maglev trains went into operation in the early 21st century. The superconducting wire was used, but it was only used to keep the electromagnetics from overheating. Their fields were repelled by those from other magnets located in the guideway of a train track. Levitation based on superconductors is a different phenomenon. Superconductors will resist having an external magnetic field penetrate their substance. There are no like and opposite poles involved. A piece of superconductor will float in an ordinary magnetic field, requiring only that the field be stronger than the periphery to keep its center. But again, the interaction is fairly weak and not suitable for exploitation by freight haulers or other, such cases.
Gigantic magnets!
How do they work? Tantalus is a massive collection of rock outcroppings floating in the atmosphere near the place of Goliath. Large deposits of superconducting unobtanium have caused these huge crevasses to levitate, with several billion tons of rocks caught between the pool of Polyphemus and the push of Pandora magnetic fields. The massive stone arches are called Malmok by the Navy or Ring of Stone. Surface travels, this wasn't really too important. Let's try the song. Songs hold a powerful place in the heart of all Navi. The history of Pandora is kept in two ways. Through the natural neural network of Ewa, which contains the memories of all things that once lived and linked to her, and in the form of oral storytelling and songs, like Irish bards or Greek epic poems. The history of Navi is spoken, not written, and people are not remembered by grave markers, but their stories of their lives as recited in the Song of a Clan.
Okay, then.
Okay, if I recall correctly, the other side to learn more about the Navi in general with the Trio Souls. The holiest sign of Pandora, the Trio Souls is a caldera of stone that is onto the Mother Tree, the oldest willow of Pandora and the strongest manifestation of Ewa on the surface of the moon. There are hundreds of disparate Navi clans of Pandora. Some of the clans, including the Tipani, live in ancient trees but are 2 or 3 times the height of the Terran redwoods that once covered the Pacific Northwest. The circumference of the home tree is great enough to house dozens of clan members. The tree is honeycombed with natural hollows and alcoves in which the Navi sleep, eat, weave, dance, and celebrate their connection to Ewa. Like many sites of Pandora is sacred. Hold on, these dweebs wanted this. The Navi are monogamous creatures who mate for life. The mechanics of production are similar to humans and other earth mammals, but the unique physiology provides the Navi with a level of intimacy unknown to Terrans. Where an appropriate mate has been selected, which can take many years, xenoanthropologists believe that the male and female Navi will connect cues to create an emotional bond that lasts lifetime. It is believed that the intertwining of cues is both highly erotic and profoundly spiritual, but does not in itself lead to reproduction.
So
in the early parts.
I never thought I would.
Asking it now.
I never thought I would live a day where I would have to go through a Navi sex ed class. I just
Navi are only pictures
Well,
outside
now
of
you're informed better.
To another deity we call Ewa. They are superb artisans who celebrate the interconnectedness of nature through storytelling, song, dance, and crafts. They are expert hunters and gatherers. In many respects, the Navi body is almost human-like, and even by human standards, beautiful. The waist is narrow and elongated, the shoulders are very wide, creating a V-shaped upper back. The neck is twice as long as the average human. The body overall is more slender than the average human is reminiscent of a Masai or Watusi. But the musculature is sharply defined, giving no sense of emaciation despite the thin pronounced proportions. They are roughly 4 times the strength of average human. Their almond-shaped cat-like eyes are large and hypersensitive to various bands of light. For balancing their long torso and legs, the Navi have long, prehensile lemur-like tail. They can traverse the landscape or the surface as well as from branch to branch in the treetops.
I see.
Mm-hmm. The abundant flora and fauna of Pandora have ensured a steady population. It is theorized that there was little Darwinian pressure to adopt new traits. Indeed, studies indicate that the number of Navi have remained remarkably consistent over the eons. Their widespread access to natural resources will help limit but not eliminate warfare among the various Navi clans.
Oh, how great for them. Because they're just so much better than us humans.
If I recall correctly, I'm gonna check. Yeah, now the characters who are now we find like the Tipani clan. The Tipani clan was one of the first Navi tribes to have contact with humans on Pandora, and yet less is known of this clan than nearly all other Crown Navi tribes combined. Preliminary reports prove to be contradictory, to say the least. The Tipani seems to be a very spiritual tribe, yet also known to be cunning and highly dangerous warriors. They are reluctant to engage in diplomacy with humans, and yet have embraced the study of their languages. Difficulties are ongoing, as the Tipani have not welcomed many avatars into their trust, choosing to be unsettlingly without further investigation. There you go. Tanjala is a senior member of Tipani clan, a master hunter known for his wise words and honest perspective. Tanjala was among the first to reach out to the Sky People, become the de facto travel ambassador to humans. While he has been vocal in his anger towards RDA strip mining, Tanjala has diligently worked towards a peaceful bond with humans. However, should conflict be unavoidable, Tanjala is rumored to be one of Tipani's most lethal and cunning warriors. Let's see Beidamo. He's a powerful and respected Navi warrior whose grim persona and stern leadership have earned him a place of high regard within the Navi Tipani. He's a master Banshee rider, rumored to be unrivaled on the airborne mount. Beidamo has taken a hardline approach with humans. In the past, however, he was quite open to human contact, even encouraging his mate, Marali, to attend the school and learn the language of Sky People. The so-called massacre changes everything. Although Marali survived the attack, Beidamo is publicly vowed never to trust the humans again. This is why he has such a grudge with us in the Navi campaign.
That's interesting to know.
And
I didn't include that in the story.
I don't know. Sanume is the Tsahik for the Tipani clan, the matriarch and the leader of the tribe. Little is known of Sanume, and as few humans have ever seen her. Report of Dr. Harper, however, state that Sanume is not opposed to human-Navi interaction, going so far to welcome a handful of avatars to her own tree.
I start to think that this is the same problem that the Fabula Nova Crystallis has, that most of the lore is not even told in the actual...
Alright, our protagonist, this is rich, trust me. Ryder was born on Earth in California within the unbroken urban sprawl that runs from San Francisco Bay to San Diego. Raised in a working-class home, Ryder never traveled any off-world outpost. Ryder missed out on the choices afforded by wealthier kids on Earth, many of whom took opportunities to leave the congested planet for bright futures in colonies in our moon, Mars, and beyond. With few options, Ryder joined the army at 18. Ryder spent 5 years immersed in the military, excelling at decoding its signals. Ryder spent the next 4 years as a signal specialist, interpreting cover codes and data, and earning the nickname Able, a common slang for six-pack. Ryder became one of the army's top signal specialists, often brought in when others had failed. Ryder was assigned an integrated communication station in the Western Pacific. In this new posting, most of the codes Ryder monitored came from a group of environmental terrorists seeking an end to end the RDA strip mining operations deep in the Mariana Trench. Though Ryder's highly skilled code breaking the military was able to fully neutralize the activities of the terrorists and eliminate it completely for the region. Months later, a disaster in the Mariana mining facility caused widespread loss of life, and a controlled collapse of tectonic plate inadvertently created a man-made tsunami that swept through the nearby coastal settlements. Evidence pointed to the disruptive activities of Mariana terrorists as a leading cause of the disaster. Soon after the disaster, for reasons unknown, Ryder transferred out of the active service into corporate code analysis for international conglomerates. Following 3 brutal years of tedium, Ryder was presented with the chance of a lifetime. Ryder was invited back to the RDA for a mission to Pandora. Ryder left her for good with information beyond the fact that the RDA needed the best signal specialist available to them. That six-pack is Babel Ryder. So yeah, our protagonist is at least implied to be, at the very least, complicit to cause an incident that killed a lot of people too. Anyway, Through his distinguished military career, Carl Falco saw combat in numerous conflicts during the later stages in the 21st century. These were often short, bloody clashes against rogue governments and terrorist factions. Upon retiring from service, Falco received several citations for leading his troops into dangerous front-lines confrontations. As with many retiring commanders, Falco is employed by the RDA through the corporation's ever-expanding private security force. He is currently one of the highest-ranking security officers from Pandora, second only to Colonel Quaritch in the RDA command structure. Speaking of which, Colonel Quaritch brings a lifetime of military experience to his role as the RDA head of security of Pandora. His special scars from Pandoran Beast are a badge of honor to his battle-hardened leader.
I wouldn't say this is in the same category as 13, but I can see what you mean, Pedro.
Batista is one of the RDA top explosives. If it goes boom, it's probably got Batista's fingerprint on it. Nicknamed Boom Boom,
I
Batista
walk
secured
alone.
expectations soon after arriving on Pandora, when he assigned dislodge a floating rocker planet transport route. Determined to make more of a task, Batista said he exposed it to dislodge a large swath of floating rocks that drifted into magical collage of mountains high above the roadway, now colloquially as Batista's past. Well, he uses bombs, so why not?
No, it's because hold on.
Raised in one of the largest and most crowded cities on Earth, London, Langley was happy to be accepted to the famous University of Cassini at the sparsely populated southern pole of Earth's moon. Here he excelled in the study of plant growth in lower gravity environments, making him an ideal candidate to study the plant life of the Pandora moon. Now in his 6th year of his mission, Dr. Langley has proven to be a valuable asset to the Navi-human interaction, earning the rare honor of joining the Navi on their hunting paths.
Nice.
And when he's wanted for charges and treason and espionage, considered armed and dangerous, all RDA forces are advised to apprehend with extreme prejudice.
Not as nice.
Grace Augustine came to Pandora nearly 3 decades ago to study the great diversity on life of Pandora. She was instrumental in the formation of the Avatar program and made one of its most experienced xenoanthropologists. And now apparently she's part of a, well, we'll have to see what the sequel says.
Only time will tell.
Let's see with Dr. Monroe, why not? Victor Monroe lived his youth in Johannesburg, the sprawling mega city of South Africa. Affluent and highly educated, he worked his entire career under lucrative constructs of the RDA Research and Development Division. Arriving on Pandora nearly 5 years ago as senior science officer, Dr. Monroe focused his primary research on the biogenetic uses of Unobtanium. He has since spearheaded a plethora of important discoveries and linked the mineral to groundbreaking uses in a vast selection of subsciences, including searching to tame the highly volatile Pandoran ecosystem, but he disappeared off screen.
And he's dead, apparently.
Yeah, supposedly at least.
Thanks, Colonel.
Renee Harper, blah blah blah, this is not important. Let's see, Officer Midori, I think.
Actually, yeah, you could consider this headcanon like a story of essentially what would happen if Colonel from Metal Gear went crazy and nuts.
Born with vast man-made atolls of Bermuda, young Renee Harper was fast attracted to the very best RDA-founded university. His seemingly uncanny ability with foreign languages and Alex soon had him on the radar as a top candidate from the xenolinguist posting on the distant moon of Pandora. Now, nearly 10 years into his mission, Dr. Harper has achieved great success in educating the Navi Tipani clan.
I need scissors. 61.
Yeah, this is not too important. So, let me see. Dr. Harper is wanted on charges, blah, blah, blah. We already know this for the others. It's the same thing as these collaborators.
Lovely.
As a small child, Kendra Midori viewed the discovery of life of Pandora as an event that completely captured the imagination. In later years, she focused her entire scholastic careers on the hope that one day she could travel to Pandora. Kendra arrived on Pandora as a highly trained RDA resource officer specializing in the terraforming of biocompatible ecosystem. Her lifelong vision is to study methods to modulate the atmosphere of Pandora, one day making the air breathable for humans beings without inhibiting the indigenous life forms. She has level 4 security and weapon clearance, giving her limited command of security personnel.
Good for her.
A former military pilot, now employed as shuttle jockey for RDA rotorcraft fleet of Pandora, sarcastic and hard-edged, Trudy Chacon serves as a personal pilot for staff of the Avatar program, which is why she does that in the movie. And that's pretty much it.
That's
The
it.
only, well, I didn't know exactly what note to end. To be fair, I wanted to see how much the Pandorapedia explained about the floating, the floating things that Pedro also noticed in the movie, the minor spirits. But it doesn't say much. Supposedly, they are a manifestation of Awa and a sort of catalyst to that. But you basically have to consider kind of like microplants, essentially. That's all you need to know.
No, see, that's the thing. See, that's the thing, Joe. It's just like, because the big problem with the Fabula Nova Crystallis is that only 10% of that lore that Nojima came up with and gave off to Toriyama and Watanabe only 10% of it is actually in the actual games.
I give Avatar credit in the sense that you don't actually need the lore as much to understand the plot. Oh, don't get me wrong. It sucks that a lot of the lore is there, but I would argue we didn't have to know it as bad as, say, the stuff that we need to know from, well, what's pretty much mentioned in data logs or wikis when it comes to that franchise with Final Fantasy.
Still,
mind you, they are from the same school of problem, but they're not the same form of problem. Avatar is in a case where it really could have had some more potential if it showcased more of its lore in both these stories as opposed to the data logs. But the story arguably still was functional enough without having to look them up. In contrast with the Final Fantasy Fabula Nova Crystallis, that's just like, well, a mess. Like, you absolutely do need to be reading the data log for the story of so much as the first game to make sense, at least at its proper pace.
Still, that's the thing. These materials alone will be perfect enough for, say, a prequel movie that showcases the rise of the RDA and essentially can easily explain the reason why they're all doing this as a great setup for, the main movie. If anything, yes. I kind of wish Disney made like a Disney Plus series or exclusive minor movie to be released before Avatar 2, so it can ease up even better that viewers into that. But at least for now, I get the idea we probably are not going to do it, and I get the idea that the story about 2 will largely either ignore or not talk about these elements, which are still canonical. These are, the things that James Cameron wrote as lore for his environment, So it's kind of a waste of good information and good setup for a sci-fi product, arguably. But anyway, do we have any further questions?
No, not really. I think I'm good for now.
Same.
There was...
I mean, the question probably won't be answered until later this year when the film supposedly comes out. But I wonder how much of this is actually going to factor into Avatar 2.
Something, like I just mentioned, something tells me not much. I want to hope that at least part of it does. Expand upon the humans, but something tells me they're probably gonna not do it. That's like a gut feeling. But anyway, I guess that's it then. So that was the Avatar game, specifically the HD version. Like I said, the Wii and the PSP versions have, a shared type of different story than this one, but I'm not sure if they are really worthy to look at. Who knows? So in the meantime, see you for whatever we do next.
See ya.
See ya.